From James Frazer's Folklore in the Old Testament, Ch.10, Solomon and the Queen of Sheeba. According to Jewish tradition, King Solomon was a sage whose reputation for wisdom spread to the ends of the earth, and from all quarters kings sent envoys to Jerusalem to profit by the sagacity and learning of the Hebrew monarch. Amongst the rest, the Queen of Sheba, not content to receive at second hand the treasures of knowledge which he dispensed to his hearers, came in person from her home in southern Arabia to question Solomon with her own lips and to listen to his wise answers. We are told that she put riddles to him and that he read them all. Not one of them did he fail to answer. What the riddles were which the queen propounded to the king, the historian omits to tell us, but later Jewish tradition has supplied the blank. The Midrash, or commentary on Proverbs, contains a list of the queen's questions and the king's answers. A few specimens may perhaps suffice to convince a modern reader that if they are genuine, the king's reputation for wisdom was somewhat cheaply earned. The queen said to Solomon, 7 there are that issue, and 9 that enter. 2 yield the draught, and 1 drinks. Solomon replied, 7 are the days of a woman's defilement, and 9 the months of pregnancy. 2 are the breasts that yield the draught, and 1 the child that drinks it. Then the queen questioned him further, saying, a woman said to her son, thy father is my father, and thy grandfather my husband. Thou art my son, and I am thy sister. Assuredly, said he, it was the daughter of Lot who spake thus to her son. Also the queen asked him, what land is that which has but once seen the sun? Solomon answered, the land upon which after the creation the waters were gathered in the bed of the Red Sea on the day when it was divided. Further the queen said, there is something which when living moves not, yet when its head is cut off it moves. It is the ship in the sea, answered Solomon. Again, what is this? Asked the queen. It comes as dust from the earth. Its food is dust. It is poured out like water, and it lights the house. Natha, replied the king curtly. But besides plumbing the depths of the king's wisdom by these searching questions, the Queen of Sheba is said to have further submitted his practical sagacity to certain experimental tests. Thus she placed a number of males and females of the same stature and garb before him, and said, distinguish between them. Forthwith Solomon made a sign to the eunuchs, and they brought him a quantity of nuts and roasted ears of corn. The males, who were not bashful, grasped with them with bare hands, but the females took them delicately, putting forth their gloved hands from beneath their garments. Whereupon Solomon cried out, those are the males, these the females. Moreover, she brought before him a number of men, some circumcised and others uncircumcised, and she asked him to distinguish between them. He at once made a sign to the high priest, who opened the Ark of the Covenant, whereupon the circumcised men bowed their bodies to half their height, while their countenances shone with the radiance of the Shekinah. But the uncircumcised men fell prone upon their faces. Those are circumcised, quoth he, these uncircumcised. Thou art wise indeed, quoth she. Afterwards the queen ordered the sawn trunk of a cedar tree to be brought, and she asked Solomon to point out at which end the root had been, and at which the branches. He bade her cast it into the water, whereupon one end sank and the other floated on the surface. The sagacious monarch then declared that the end which sank was the root end, and that the end which floated was the branch end. This proof of his penetration filled the queen with admiration. Thou exceedest in wisdom and goodness the fame which I heard, cried she. Blessed be thy God. The Queen of Sheba was not the only potentate with whom the royal sage at Jerusalem is reported to have engaged in a contest of wit. It is said that Solomon propounded a riddle to Hiram, king of Tyre, laying a wager that he could not read it. The Tyrian monarch accepted the challenge, but though he puzzled over the problem, he could not find the answer, so Solomon won his wager. But his triumph was short-lived, for a man of Tyre named Abdon now came forward as a champion of his king and country, and not only solved Solomon's riddle, but propounded one of his own, which the Hebrew sage, for all his wisdom, was unable to read. In Central Celebs, similar stories are told of contestants of wit between the rival Rajas of Luwu and Mori. It is said, for example, that the Raja of Mori, hearing reports of the other's greatness, resolved to test his power and glory. For this purpose, he sent him an iron staff bent into a loop, with the request that he would straighten it out. The Raja of Luwu put the staff in a furnace, and when it was red hot, he straightened it out, as he had been requested to do. Having performed the task set him, he now, in his turn, tested his rival by sending the Raja of Mori a tube of sago, baked in a bamboo and bent into a loop while it was still warm. The tube he begged the Raja of Mori to straighten out. The Raja of Mori accordingly set to work on the tube of sago, but do what he would, he could not straighten it out. If he tried to do it when the sago was dry, the tube threatened to break in his hands. If he tried to do it when the sago was damp, by being dipped in water, the tube dissolved, and if he warmed it up to dry it again, the sago melted into a solid mass. So in this trial of skill, the Raja of Luwu got the better of the Raja of Mori. However, in another story, the Raja of Mori contrives to defeat his rival. The Raja of Luwu had sent him a piece of cotton with a request that he would draw out all the threads. This the Raja of Mori contrived to do, and having executed the task, he sent the Raja of Luwu in return a piece of bark cloth with a request that the Raja would be so good as to draw out all the threads from that. In vain, the Raja of Luwu struggled to disentangle all the fibers of the bark. At last, he had to give it up and acknowledge that the Raja of Mori was at least his peer. Yet another story, however, reverses the parts played by the two potentates and assigns the superiority to the Raja of Luwu. It is said that a Raja of Luwu came to visit the Raja of Mori, and that the two sat up late at night talking by the light of a resin torch after all the other folk in the palace had gone to sleep. As the torch guttered and threatened to go out, the Raja of Mori took a stick and directed the flow of resin so that the flame burst out again as bright as ever. Now this is a task which is usually performed by a slave, and the good-natured Raja only did it with his own hands because all his slaves were abed. However, his astute rival at once took advantage of his politeness to place him in position of inferiority. Because you have snuffed the torch, said he to the Raja of Mori, you are less than I, and you must pay me homage. The crestfallen but candid Raja of Mori acknowledged the justice of the observation and confessed the superiority of the Raja of Luwu. If we had the Queen of Sheba's version of her interview with King Solomon, we might perhaps discover that in the war of wit she was at least able to hold her own against the Hebrew monarch. In the dreary wilderness of the Quran, which by comparison with the glorious literature of the Old Testament remains an eternal monument of the inferiority of the Arab to the Hebrew genius, we read how Solomon tested the discernment of the Queen of Sheba by overlaying his court of audience with glass, and how the Queen of Sheba, falling into the trap, mistook the glass for water and drew up her skirts to wade through it. Later Arab tradition has not unnaturally dwelt by predilection on the visit of a native Arab princess to the wise king at Jerusalem, and has adorned or disfigured the simple theme by many fanciful details. Among the rest, it enlarges on the trivial incident of the glassy pavement. Envious or malignant demons had whispered, so it is alleged, in Solomon's ear that the queen had hairy legs or the feet of an ass. And in order to prove or disprove the truth of the accusation, the sage king resorted to the expedient of the crystal floor. When the queen raised her skirts to wade through the imaginary water, Solomon saw that the story of her deformity was a vile calumny, and his too susceptible heart receiving a strong impression of her charms, he added her to the numerous ladies of his harem. At Jerusalem, the legend is told to this day, and the very spot where the incident happened is pointed out. It's a few yards within the gate called Bab el-Asbat, or the Gate of the Tribes, the only gateway now left open in the eastern wall of the city. Here down to the summer of 1906, there stood an old bathhouse, which dated from the summer days of the Saracens, but which, according to tradition, had been built by King Solomon for the use of the Queen of Sheba. The deception of the crystal pavement occurs also as an incident in the great Indian epic, the Mahabharata. We there read how on one occasion the dull-witted king Duryodhana mistook a sheet of crystal for a sheet of water and tucked up his skirts to wade through it. How another time he, on the contrary, mistook a lake of crystal water for dry land, and well splashed into it with all his clothes on, to the amusement of the spectators and even of his own servants. How he tried to pass through a crystal door, which he supposed to be open, but knocked his brow against its hard surface till his head ached and his brains reeled. And how after this painful experience he came to an open door, but turned away from it because he feared to encounter the obstruction of crystal again. Despite the resemblance between the two stories in the Quran and the Mahabharata, neither the prophet nor the poet can well have copied directly the one from the other. The prophet because he did not read Sanskrit, and the poet because he died before the prophet was born. If they did not both draw independently from the wellspring of fancy and incident for the creation of which an imagination less than Miltonic might conceivably have sufficed, they may have borrowed it from a popular tale which circulated alike in the bazaars of India and the tents of Arabia. Chapter 11, The Judgment of Solomon. Of the proofs of Solomon's extraordinary wisdom, which the Hebrew historian has recorded, the most celebrated is the mode whereby, in a dispute between two wenches for the possession of a child, of which both claimed to be the mother, he distinguished the real from the pretended parent by ordering the infant to be cut in two and divided between the claimants, whereupon maternal affection overmastering all other feelings, the real mother begged that the child might be spared and given alive to her rival, while the pretended mother was quite ready to acquiesce in the bisection of the babe. Like much else that is told of King Solomon, the anecdote has the air rather of a popular tale than of an historical narrative. True or false, it has passed into folklore, having been incorporated into that vast legendary literature of the Jains, which as yet has been only partially explored by European scholars. 4 of these Indian versions of the story have been discovered in recent times. They all bear family resemblance to each other and to their Hebrew original. It will be enough to cite one of them, which runs as follows. A certain merchant had 2 wives. One of them had a son and the other had not. But the childless wife also took good care of the other's child. And the child was not able to distinguish, this is my mother, that is not. Once on a time, the merchant, with his wives and his son, went to another country, and just after his arrival there, he died. Then the 2 wives fell to quarreling. One of them said, mine is this child, and the other said just the same. One said, it is I who am the mistress of the house, and the other said, it is I. At last they carried the dispute before a royal court of justice. The presiding minister of justice gave an order to his men. First divide the whole property, then saw the child in 2 with a saw and give one part to the woman and the other part to the other. But when the mother heard the minister's sentence, it was as if a thunderbolt enveloped in 1,000 flames had fallen on her head, and with her heart all trembling, as if it had been pierced by a crooked dart, she contrived with difficulty to speak. Ah, sire, great minister, she said, is not mine this child. The money is of no use to me. Let the child be the son of that woman, and let her be the mistress of the house. As for me, it is no matter if I drag out an indigent life in strange houses. Though it be from a distance, yet shall I see that child living, and so shall I attain the object of my life. Whereas without my son, even now the whole living world is dead to me. But the other woman uttered never a word. Then the minister, beholding the distress of the former woman, said, to her belongs the child, but not to that one. And he made the mother the mistress of the house, but the other woman he rebuked. End of Volume 2.